You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Bob Harris and Mr. Kyle Dvorchak. Gentlemen, the Super Bowl has concluded. There is no more football for the 2019 season. Chiefs have won the Super Bowl. Pretty good game. Yeah, I was satisfied with everything, including the halftime show. Mr. Harris, what's up?
31-20 for the those of you who might have been in hibernation or somehow missed it. The Chiefs getting their championship game, first one in 50 years, I guess, for them. And Andy Reid finally gets the win that certainly seals his place in the NFL Hall of Fame. If it wasn't already there, this seals it. And Kyle, obviously the big use check guy on the team here. How excited were you?
Yeah, it was a good game. I mean, the final score doesn't look like it was a nail biter, but I'm really up until the last drive. It was, and it was very poetic that we got the final Jimy Garoppolo drive. Like, it kind of played out the way that people said it had to play out to prove that the Chiefs were better. It was like, obviously the better quarterback. They have the 49ers have almost more talent everywhere else, though. And it comes down to if Jimy Garoppolo can hang out in prime time, and he couldn't. And that's not to say he's bad. It was just like when push comes to shove, it turns out having the best quarterback, like a quarterback that can do things we've never seen before, and the best quarterback playing in the NFL right now by maybe a wide margin, especially as a pure passer. It turns out that's the edge you needed, and having Jimy Garoppolo just doesn't cut it for most Super Bowls.
As a pure and a creative passer, I mean. And we'll talk about maybe another guy who's going to challenge him for that, maybe a couple guys down the road, though. But for right now, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is certainly the real deal. As all of us here on this podcast as 2/3 of us here on this podcast fully expected upon his arrival in the NFL.
Never going to hear the end of it.
You're never going to hear the end of it, but that's okay. We still love you, Justin.
But you know what, though? While we're cracking on my skepticism about Patrick Mahomes, you remember that situation where Alex Smith was coming off that great year, and it was like, wow, it was tough to imagine. But then you said, and I listened, and you were right. Look, GMs, head coaches, they're smarter than we are, and they saw something with Patrick Mahomes, and making it so that Alex Smith could move on. And Alex Smith, after that long leash, San Francisco, Kansas City. He had a great year. He probably had the best year of his career.
Yeah.
And here comes Patrick Mahomes.
And I think that interesting. If I didn't see this right, I'm going to Google it while we're talking. I think Alex Smith is going to get a Super Bowl ring from the Chiefs.
There were rumors of that, and would not be surprised if he got it. Like
I believe the rumor has been confirmed.
Good for him.
But either way,
I ask why?
For the effort that he put in for maybe it has not been confirmed, but he was part of the win. The Chiefs considered him part of the win for the effort that he did mentoring Pat Mahomes. It's a kind gesture by a team that's quite pleased that they won the Super Bowl.
He was really sick.
Yeah, and boy, if you saw the article by Stephania Bell on ESPN, pretty in-depth interview and some work there about he nearly lost his leg, Alex Smith. So we'll get into that another time. But a great story of how he helped Pat Mahomes out. And I guess, adding to this, all the mojo here is we really, we wanted a huge offensive game. I thought it was playing out the way my prediction was going. I predicted the 49ers would win 24-21. I was feeling pretty good.
Yeah, you even had it down to the matchup in the trenches really favoring the 49ers, which it did. Like, Mahomes was struggling to get the ball off in time. They were getting to him. And just sometimes magic works its way. But you did. I will say, you had that pretty down pat on how the game would flow up until three quarters.
But here's the thing. My proviso was that Patrick Mahomes is the X factor. And he wasn't the X factor in the way, look, those had a couple of long passes. Damian Williams. Look, maybe we can talk about who we really feel should have been the MVP in this game. Was it Mahomes? Was it Damian Williams? Was it someone else? But I felt like Mahomes, as the X factor, those long plays notwithstanding, what he did was he, over the course of those 3 quarters, wore the pass rush down. right? I mean, I think he just kind of tuckered them out. And so in the fourth quarter, they weren't quite the force they were earlier in the game. So I feel like, much credit to Pat Mahomes, much credit to Andy Reid, who dug not only into the playbook. I mean, we went high school plays on some of those things, the direct snap to Damian Williams, some trickery with Travis Kelce as well. So great work by them. The one of the things we were talking about, Justin, as the game progressed, and I felt like maybe we were a little overly critical, was the clock management at the end of the first half by Kyle Shanahan. Didn't use the timeouts. I thought he was kind of vindicated by the fact that they came out and, built on the lead to start the second half. How did you feel about that clock management?
Well, it wasn't good. In hindsight is 2020. But I mean, this game was Patrick Mahomes, and too much Patrick Mahomes, not enough San Francisco 49ers. I mean, you can look back and you can say, but I think in all reality, it was Kyle Shanahan that got the 49ers to the Super Bowl. I mean, John Lynch has built a hell of a staff there. You can't. It's one play or a series of plays is not going to determine the outcome of a 4-quarter football game. I think we can all be in agreement there. So hindsight is 2020. You can look back, you can nitpick, but the truth of the matter is they didn't bring their A game for 4 quarters, and that's what you need against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And it's going to be that way for a while, I feel.
Yeah, like as in like the next 15 years.
Right.
So, and I do feel like, I mean, look, we can sit there and say, oh, he blew the didn't call the timeout. I think a lot of that had to do with John Lynch, being shown standing in his suite, signaling for a timeout. But in the end, I don't think that was really a determining factor in the outcome of the game. And Jimy Garoppolo is a big story. A lot of chatter on the Twitter box today about, there's time to move on. They need to explore upgrades. Kyle, do they need to explore upgrades?
So I guess this is like a situation that so many organizations will face, is that and no organization says yes to this thing. We hardly ever see organizations go from very good above average quarterback play and seek out league winning quarterback play. Because Garoppolo was good during the regular season. He wasn't MVP caliber, and I don't think he has that in his arsenal, barring just a wacky high variance mega touchdown season. But I don't think he has that repeatably in his arsenal. He was a fringe top 10 passer in terms of adjusted yards per attempt. His QB rating, it was fringe top 10. He's good. I don't know if he'll ever hit a top 3, a top 4 season. But is that good enough to continue to make the playoffs, to continue to even get back to the Super Bowl? If they continue to build the right way, they continue to run innovative offensive schemes, have a very talented defense. Yeah, so I don't think there's it's hard to find guys like Russell Wilson, like Patrick Mahomes, like Lamar Jackson. And it's probably not a risk. I can't imagine it's a risk worth taking when you have a quarterback who's clearly at least average with a team built to build him up in a way that makes him above average to very good, fringe top 10. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think the upside is that attainable in getting a guy like Patrick Mahomes when Garoppolo is still a very good, just not MVP caliber passer.
So it's easy to sit here and look at, at this game in particular, and we're going to make direct comparisons between the two quarterbacks. And Jimy Garoppolo is clearly not Patrick Mahomes, right? And no one should ever expect him to be, but I don't know that means he's not a good quarterback. Obviously had a hand. And I keep pointing back to some of those games that he showed up for, or that maybe better to say Kyle Shanahan put the ball in his hands, literally. And let him take over the games, New Orleans in Week 14 being the prime example. But there were other games where he played reasonably well. I think they have some talented young players in that offense that will contribute as receivers. Obviously, George Kittle, for years to come, will be a frontline tight end of maybe one of the more productive players in all of football, regardless of position. Deebo Samuel seems to be emerging as kind of Kyle Shanahan's, a chess piece for him. That guy, he's moving them all around the formation, using him in motion to sniff out what the opposing defense is doing, then using him as a receiver and a ball carrier. So I think there's a lot there to like. Yeah, I think there's a lot there to like. Great blocker. Yeah, I think there's a lot there to like. And George Kittle as well. So there'll be plenty of running.
What
I don't know. Who? I don't know.
I know. We were high on him in the offseason. I thought he was going to be the guy. And then, wow, things changed quick.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of the That's kind of the question there. What happened with Dante Pettis? Obviously, Emmanuel Sanders could have made just missed on what would have been a long pass from Jimy Garoppolo, who overthrew clearly. But we'll see if he sticks around. In the rushing attack, Kyle, who is going to be the first San Francisco 49ers running back drafted in fantasy drafts in 2020?
I mean, who's it going to be? It's going to be Raheem Mostert. Like, I can't, after what we saw down the stretch, I'd be shocked if it was anybody but him. He'll probably get overdrafted because committee backs that end the season hot always seem to get overdrafted. And not that he won't enter the season and continue to be the lead back, but just it's my guess that when you see a guy who operates in a committee who has basically no history of regular season NFL production until now, and then goes nuclear for a stretch of 8 games or so, like we see this all the time, and not say that he can't sustain a modest level of success, it's probably he'll get overdrafted. These guys literally get overdrafted every year.
Justin, speaking of drafts backs who will get overdrafted, or certainly one that was last year in general, for the same reason he likely will be this year, right? Damian Williams came on strong, returned from his injury week 16, had a big game, just really rolled through the playoffs. Can't remember multiple touchdowns in multiple playoff games. I mean, he's been amazing in the playoffs, and so last year I think he rose up into third round territory, and obviously didn't live up to that draft status throughout the year, but he did at the end. I don't know that he came on strong enough, soon enough to help fantasy owners. What is his logical value to you as we leave this season and head into drafts this year?
I would say it's going to be right around where it was last year. I mean, the way I draft, regardless, unless I won 2 or 3, I'm always going to take a couple wide receivers early, and I suppose, and actually I had them in the draft book, which I won that league, by the way, men. You were in the league with Williams, and I think I had Austin Eckler. So was I dancing for joy when I drafted Damian Williams? Certainly not. But the allure here is you're going to want a piece of this Kansas City Chiefs offense, and you're probably going to have to pay a first-round premium for Travis Kelce. You're probably going to have to pay a first-round premium for Tyreek Hill, or second round, I would estimate. And Patrick Mahomes is going to be drafted high as well, and we'll wait on quarterbacks. That's how we roll. So you want a piece of this Chiefs offense. And I think if you're going to get a cheaper piece, outside of like the Sammy Watkins of the world and the Hardmans, you're going to probably get Williams. Now, this is a running back where he's 28 in March, I think. So he's getting to that age of 30. I think he can still squeeze a couple of years out of him. If Andy Reid is as high on him this year, which he should be, as he was last offseason, that this is my guy, which is exactly what happened, despite the cloudiness with McCoy. And Darwin Thompson was thrown around. I was actually optimistic to see him run. Spencer Ware, but at the end of the day, it was Damian Williams. So round 3 for sure. I wouldn't knock anybody for doing it.
A little talk about Sammy Watkins. Will he be around? Likely will need to take a pay cut. Suggested he might be open to that. Also suggested he might sit out a year.
Walk away.
But he loves somebody. Yeah, I'm thinking that's the least likely of the possible outcomes. But that's something we'll be watching for going forward. Tyreek Hill, before we get off this game and move on to other things, I wanted to ask Kyle on Tyreek Hill. I feel like he's going to be, you look at the, early rankings out there, floating around out there. He's, I see him as high, certainly in the top 12. I'm not sold. I thought the workload was not sufficient as as after he returned from injury. And when I'm drafting, especially early on, certainty of workload is a big deal for me. Are you confident enough in his workload, or does it just not matter because of his playmaking ability and the quarterback he's working with?
Yeah, that's kind of how I would categorize it. He's almost certainly. I mean, I can guarantee you, barring injury, he will not get the same amount of targets as I'll say like Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, like any of the top. I'll say 5 or 6 receivers, and it doesn't really matter when you play with Patrick Mahomes. And I think you have to accept that you're going to get some like 3 catch for 40-yard lines. Like that's going to happen every now and then. But you're also going to get Super Bowl performances where you get 16 targets. Catches 9 of 105, and like he had a double touchdown game before that. He had 3 double touchdown games in a season that he lost multiple games due to injury. Like he's that's gonna happen, and I'll take that sort of variance. And, I think generally some people say they try and balance it out with, like, higher weekly floor guys, but I just take all the variance guys, and when they hit, like, you crush. And, like, it's not like if you take a lot of guys like Tyreek Hill, they're still hitting more often than they're missing on a weekly basis, at least some semblance. And, like, over the stretch, Tyreek Hill actually was, like, a mega floor guy, ironically. He went over, his final, 3, 4, 5 regular season games, over 50 yards, and over four or more catches in every single one of those, over 40 in the past, looks like 8 or 9 games. So, like, when you play a lot with Patrick Mahomes, you kind of probably just have a floor, because he's so incredibly accurate that he's going to get you the ball if you're getting 5 or 6 targets a game a lot. So, yeah, he's not going to have the same exact stat lines as a guy like Michael Thomas, but I think I'll pay for the upside again this year. And if he doesn't get hurt this year, he's probably a top 3 receiver. So
right, we'll see how that plays out. I think that's interesting, and I'm gonna congratulate you on drafting him much earlier than I. And look, and I'm not saying it won't pay off. It's just that workload is a little worrisome to me. I do agree with the upside, however. There was a halftime show. Justin was thrilled by it. I will say, as an elder American, I would like to congratulate America on the golden era of age-appropriate hotness we are living in now. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, America. We really
you contribute
that.
You contribute to it. You contribute to it. And I am, firmly heterosexual, but hey, good story. We were talking about it before the show. You're impressive and you're handsome. Show people.
I am very handsome.
That's the same guy.
I'm not like Kyle Dvorchak handsome, but let's move on to the honors, the NFL honors that came out also the night before the Super Bowl. Maybe we can, I don't want to get too far into the Hall of Fame selection, but Isaac Bruce clearly was due. There was a little bit of a logjam there that had held him up over the years. Edgerrin James in as well as skill player. A lot, so I don't want to get into that. I'm more interested in the here and now as the fantasy players. So we can talk about the offensive player of the year, the offensive rookie of the year, and the most valuable player of the year. Interesting, a consensus pick on that. Only the second unanimous MVP in NFL history after Tom Brady in 2010 was this year the 2019 version of Lamar Jackson. And he was amazing. Look, I mean, there's no other way to put it. The guy lit the world, changed. Part of this vanguard of young quarterbacks is going to change the way we view the position, I believe, along with Pat Mahomes. We'll see if Kyler Murray can jump in the fun. Your thoughts, Justin, on Lamar Jackson in terms of, for me, I feel like, the regression that we expected of Patrick Mahomes this year, we saw maybe in part because of the injuries, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But I feel like Jackson is not set up for that same level of regression.
The question, so you're going to draft Lamar Jackson. You're probably going to have to draft him at a premium, meaning round 2, because we see the rushing equity, and that's obviously the differentiator. He looks like he's poised in the pocket, does not have a ton of weaponry around him, which was, to me, it's made him even more impressive this year because basically he's leaned on Mark Andrews. I mean, you have a rookie in Hollywood Brown that I think is going to be damn good as well, but not like a Chiefs arsenal. So it was impressive, but can he sustain that running at this level consistency? It's crazy. He's not the biggest guy in the world, and he's not small either, but at this level, it's a good way to get killed, and I think you're really rolling the dice because you're going to have to pay a premium, and I'm not an injury forecaster by any stretch, but he clearly deserved it. Is he able to continue that for the next couple of years? I mean, if I was an insurance company, his premium would be astronomically high because of the speed of the game, and people are going to be gunning for him. They know he's going to be running, and it doesn't. And historically, I mean, pocket quarterbacks have had the longest success, in my opinion. And if he's rushing the ball 10, 15, 20 times a game, only a matter of time till something happens to him. So I want to see Lamar Jackson really turn into more of a pocket quarterback. I know he did this season, but even more. I mean, you want to protect your asset, and I think that as a part of being an NFL quarterback, you have to have a little of this and a little of that, and not just a rusher. But again, he showed us, he could do it all. I am nervous, and I'm certainly not going to be reaching for him round 2 or 3. But you guys loved him and had a lot of them in best balls, but you were also paying for him. What round?
Yeah, it was 8th, 9th, I think as we got a little. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but as I got into I was really buying heavily as we rolled into heading into the regular season. And I feel like, people were starting to buy into it a little bit more at that point. But you're right. I mean, all up to that point through the summer, it was certainly double digits. And so let's talk about a guy that I'd love to see go into double digits, but I don't think he will. The offensive rookie of the year, Kyler Murray. Are we all going to be paying for a second-year breakout based on what we've seen from some of these other young quarterbacks? And is it merited here with Kyler Murray?
Yeah, so I guess there are a few factors that would play into this. Mostly, number one would be, do we get the sort of Baker Mayfield hype? Like, I was so excited for Baker Mayfield last year, and luckily everybody priced me out of him. I had, very little Baker Mayfield because, it was, everyone caught up to the hype. He was going, 7th, 8th, 9th round, and you could get Kyler Murray, you could get Lamar Jackson, you can get these guys after him that I just can't imagine, why you would pay the premium for him. So if Kyler Murray gets to that point, which it's a very similar scenario to what we saw with Baker, this young flashy second year quarterback in an offensive system that we think will work out well for him. Although I feel more confident about the Arizona Cliff Kingsbury offense than I guess I should have about whatever dysfunction the Browns thought they were running. But yeah, I think if I have to guess, that's probably where the hype goes because he's in that very similar Baker Mayfield mold. But I also want to see them continue to fill out the weapons around him. They tried, kind of, by getting Andy Isabella, who they chose not to play at all. I don't, I'm not there. I'm not watching practices. Maybe he truly just was not fit to play in the NFL this season. But I don't know what they were, I don't know. That's tough to see him not really get it at all. They lost another rookie.
Hakeem Butler.
Yes, they lost Hakeem Butler before the season started. And I think they made at least one trade for the Pittsburgh offensive lineman. They tried to do whatever they could to bolster their offensive line, but it was starting from such a horrible place. Then they lost guys to injuries that it just was almost a lost cause immediately. So if they can sort of do things to bolster their line, maybe add some receiving talent, I don't know. If they want to add tight ends, I think that's fine, but that's an offensive scheme that doesn't necessarily need a tight end. Just do things like we see that, really like we saw with the Chiefs a few years ago when they built their team around this high-flying Patrick Mahomes offense. Even, they had such organizational cohesiveness where they knew the direction they were going. We saw it this year with Lamar Jackson. If we can continue to see that from the Cardinals, I'd be very interested in him. I probably wouldn't pay the premium in redraft, but in 2 QB leagues, yeah, I'll pay the premium there. Or my dynasty leagues, yeah, I'd love to pay the premium there because I do think he falls in line with guys like we thought Baker Mayfield would be, and I still think that to an extent that Baker Mayfield will be an NFL success at one point, and guys like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson.
I see him at QB5. QB5, your friend. Eric Carabell, who I know you're friends with and worked with for years, has. So you're right. Kyler Murray is at 5, only behind Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Watson, Russell Wilson. Then there's Murray, and you get into Prescott, Rodgers, Wentz, Allen, Winston, Breeze, Roethlisberger, Newton, and on and on and on. And we tend to wait because I think you can in a pass-happy league. So number 5, it's February.
I'm telling you, if Dak Prescott is falling down, if I'm getting a whiff of double-digit rounds and Dak Prescott's still around, I'm going to be thinking seriously about that. In addition, I'm going to be looking for plenty of shares of Daniel Jones, I think, who will be fairly cheap still. Mention Dak Prescott. Also, we'll mention Ryan Tannehill, who won Comeback Player of the Year award. I'm mentioning them because, of course, as we all know, the NFL is the ultimate 365-day-a-year reality show. That show began the minute the Super Bowl was over, maybe even before I started seeing ads on NFL Network and ESPN for the Scouting Combine, which is how they end February. So we'll have a month of hype leading into the Scouting Combine. Hit the Football Diehards website for the Gridiron Scholars early looks at some of the college football prospects. We'll be adding those. Quarterbacks are up now, so he'll be adding those in coming days, the big John Laub. But we'll go through the Scouting Combine. Then right into March, we go to free agency. I believe the signing period itself begins the 18th or 20th, I guess. The tampering period begins, the legal tampering period begins a little earlier. And they'll have to set the tags by, I think March 10th. So those guys we mentioned, 2 teams in particular to start the ball rolling. We're kind of set the table for the free agency, not get too deep into it, but let you know what to look for. And obviously there's 2 teams that have a lot going on. At quarterback, the Cowboys will have to figure out a deal for Dak Prescott. And Titans will have to figure out what the hell they're going to do with Ryan Tannehill At the same time, both those teams have two other primetime players. In the case of the Titans, Derrick Henry, who kind of suggested on the Rich Eisen podcast that Zeke Elliott's $90 million deal was the floor for new deals. He kind of clarified that later. People are overlooking this, but I think he confused floor and ceiling. He was just kind of vague there. So, but they're going to owe him a lot of money. They're going to have to decide to keep Tannehill or not, and how to do both those guys, while the Cowboys will be facing the Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper conundrum. I believe this is the last year of the CBA, so they can use both their franchise and transition tags. Mm-hmm. So that's available. Those are options for both those teams. Justin, I'll start with you. Let's start with the Cowboys. No way Dak gets away. I mean, it's not going to happen. I suppose it's possible Cooper could, but Dak is now starting the public angle of negotiations, whereas he seemed to be very patient and wasn't pushing the matter all through last summer and through this season. He mentioned the other day how, well, it might be a little insulting to get the franchise tag, a little disappointing. I rephrase that. His word was disappointing. I'm not sure how you can be disappointed in $28 million for 1 year. We all saw Kirk Cousins ride that to great wealth. Yep. Folding that out over 3 years with Washington before cashing in with a fully guaranteed deal with the Vikings. But how do you see this one playing out? Are you on board with Dak staying, and what are they going to do with Cooper?
Yeah, I think Dak Prescott, he is your priority. And we've talked at length, that you've been saying this for years, of there's a need for competent quarterback play in the NFL. And even if you're not, Dak Prescott is not, say, Drew Brees, or he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's damn good in a league full of, good enough quarterback play. And I would put him in an elite tier. I think if you're certainly going to get a fantasy discount, especially if you can get him in double-digit rounds. He's comfortable in the system. He has the weapons around him. We saw what Michael Gallup can do. Zeke is locked up, so you got your backfield. Michael Gallup is doing his thing. I think, Dak Prescott could easily, and he probably will, finish as a QB1 in 2020.
QB2 this year, right? I mean,
yeah. PFF had him in the middle of the road. The knock against the Cowboys was they can't beat anybody that's good. I mean, I think time will tell. He's coming into his own, and he's coming at a good time. We've seen some of these quarterbacks, including Tom Brady, just get, they're not getting paid what they probably should be. And then there's the Flaccos of the world and some of these Brock Osweiler deals where, if you're Dak Prescott, you look at Jerry Jones and say, really? Like, give me a blank check, have me write down a number. I think that's where we're at. He's priority number one. Naturally, you're going to want to keep Amari Cooper. I mean, when he was on the field, when Amari Cooper was on the field, they were a phenomenal offense. And then, with obviously Michael Gallup on the other side, it's a damn good, high-octane offense. So, however, Amari Cooper is going to be looking at probably $18, $20 million a year. Like you said, they could tag him, but he would be a priority as well. Obviously, I think in order of priorities, it's Dak Prescott, then Amari Cooper for certain. I mean, Amari Cooper, it kind of saddened me to see him leave the Raiders. Thought he was sinking in with Derek Carr. I thought we were going to watch those guys bloom together for years. Did not work out. And then he went to Dallas. And what he did last year, the ass end of 2018 was spectacular. I mean, he was doing what any wide receiver in the NFL can do, polished at it, Alabama. He's elite. He's the real deal. Like to see him play 16 games with Dak Prescott. That'll be one of the top QB wide receiver duos in the NFL for a number of years to come.
You mentioned Derek Carr. He probably blocked you on Twitter for that. Kyle, what about the Tannehill-Henry situation? This one seems a bit more tenuous. I do think it's fair to assume there's no way Dak Prescott's getting away from the Cowboys. Is it possible the Titans will think carefully before paying up for Ryan Tannehill?
Nah, it doesn't sound like something they'd do. To be fair, I mean, he killed it at the end of the year, was maybe, by a lot of measures, the best quarterback, on a season-long basis. So I guess there's a few things. One, he's not going to command the same amount of money, so it'll be a bit more affordable, but they do have another player that they're trying to lock up that's going to cost them so much money. I still think they get both done. Maybe just because of the narrative of how much that he turned their season around. And I mean, he under Ryan Tannehill, I mean, in the playoffs he didn't have to do much, but under Ryan Tannehill, they were a killer of a team. I think whether or not that is going to continue doesn't matter as much as what it did in terms of the optics. He's going to stay with the team, and I think both of them stay with the team. And my guess is both of them stay with the team to the long-term detriment of the team, because we know running the ball isn't even as well as they ran the ball, that's not how you're going to beat teams like the Chiefs. That's not how you're going to beat these high-powered offenses. So is it going to make them a long-term, AFC Championship Super Bowl contender, or is it going to sort of sink them into sort of purgatory where they're good, not great? I lean towards the latter, because I don't think that's how you build a team necessarily, is paying a running back a ton and then attempting to run the ball a ton while you pay a quarterback a lot to not do much. So in my opinion, they get both the guys back, and it's probably to the detriment of the organization.
Yeah, as the Rams face a 2020 where Todd Gurley's new deal kicks in, as Todd Gurley's heels.
Yeah, it is very similar.
Maybe they were saving Gurley for when his contract kicks in. That's what it was. Okay.
But is Derek? What do you think of Derek? I mean, zero involvement in the passing game. I think he's good. Great. I feel like he's great. I feel like if you're drafting Derrick Henry, and look, he's going to go in the first round, right, guys? Or he's going to certainly be a top 10 pick. Mm-hmm. I think in most fantasy leagues, you have to go in with the assumption that the Titans are smart enough to know he can't carry the ball 30 times a game all year long, and it might be a little lean the first half. I'm not going to give them all the greatest credit in the world for being so smart that they didn't run him harder earlier in the season, but it's possible, right? I mean, the heavy usage down the stretch. I mean, he matched or exceeded Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, other backs just with his final 8 games. I mean, insane.
So it's fair to say that, if that's their plan, fantasy owners could probably live with that, because when do you want him to be that guy the last 8 games? So we'll see how it plays out. It'll be something we watch carefully. On the some other free agents, we'll just touch on these quickly so we can get y'all out of here in a reasonable amount of time. But Drew Brees, Taysom Hill, Teddy Bridgewater, all free agents coming up in unrestricted. It does sound like we're starting to get to the point where Taysom Hill, Sean Payton is starting to see some, have visions of a athletic, mobile. Now, where have we heard this before? Maybe earlier in this pod. Young quarterback, but he's still a little ways off. So my guess is Brees will be back. Tom Brady, obviously, the talk all day, Super Sunday, if you were watching the pregame shows and all the national insiders, everyone debating the possibility of the Patriots being willing to go up in the $30 million range. Tom Brady basically not really as worried about the money as he is the supporting cast. The Patriots are going to want an answer before free agency. The Patriots can't prove their willingness to surround him with great talent until free agency. We'll see. Talk of the Chargers, talk of the Raiders. I just got blocked by Derek Carr. And then Phillip Rivers, Jameis Winston will both be unrestricted free agents, it seems. So Justin, you went at length on Brady last week. Love the Hulu commercial. Was the best ad of the Super Bowl, I'll have to say. After the cryptic tweet last week with the photo, it was all a setup, and he ain't going nowhere, he says, but he may. We'll see how that plays out. So I want to give you the Jameis Winston, Justin.
Sure.
Or if you're the Buccaneers, do you pay him?
I don't know that I do at this point. I mean, we're look, 30 interceptions last year, 7 pick sixes. He has been unleashed, and I think as an organization, you got to look at, if 3 of us were sitting down, we'd have to say, look, we've let this guy do his thing for quite a while. Is he what we anticipated? Probably not. But there's other areas on that Bucs team, and they always feel so good, and they look good on offense. But he just makes a lot of stupid decisions at this point in time. And one would think that he would be able to grasp, being a professional at this point in time. Is he good enough I don't want to call it the sea of mediocrity, but is he competent enough? Yeah. He's very turnover prone. He's going to be in an NFC South where there's going to be some moving pieces. We don't know what's up with Cam Newton. I think Drew Brees will sail off into the sunset eventually. It's about time that they're competitive. And this, trial here is getting to be the point where somebody's going to have to make a decision. But again, a guy like Rivers just moved his family to Florida. Could you use him in somewhat of a bridge year? That might make some sense. Winston's going to demand a lot of money. I don't know that I would want to be in my quarterback because of all the mistakes that he's prone to making. Do I want him as my fantasy quarterback? Absolutely.
Especially if he's playing for Bruce Arians, though, and he has that supporting cast.
Well,
I don't know
if I'm going
to be as enthusiastic somewhere else. It's the running back class, Kyle. I mean, Melvin Gordon is pretty much, and Derrick Henry, and let's assume Derrick Henry is not going to be going anywhere for the purposes of the rest of this conversation, or that he is, and we've already run through it. But I want to get your thoughts on Melvin Gordon. So Houston has Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde both available. If someone were to wind up in either, I guess there's two destinations to me, Houston and or Tampa Bay. Any thoughts on Melvin Gordon's next destination, and what kind of, how would you view him as a true, as a running back 2? Would he be back in running back 1 territory?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, it depends where he lands. That's kind of, I mean, for running backs, that is like the entire crux of what I care about is where they are. That's the reason we cared about Damian Williams and everyone, poo-pooed guys like Le'Veon Bell, rightfully so, for both of them. If Damian would have been healthy, I think he would have crushed because we saw Damian healthy. Le'Veon Bell, on the other hand, was healthy, and it did not matter because his team was trash. So, I mean, if we see Melvin Gordon, honestly, I don't think Melvin Gordon, I don't think he's that talented. Like, we saw Austin Eckler be a more dynamic, efficient, and just more productive back. And we've seen this from Melvin Gordon multiple years throughout his career. Like, he's got 1 year above 4 yards per attempt on his career. Yeah, he's just he's a grinder. He's just a grinder who's also pretty solid at catching dump offs, but he's not like an elite route runner or anything. If he goes onto a team that can score touchdowns, and I think he will be the lead back there, which if you're bringing in Melvin Gordon, you're most likely going to be at least the touchdown scorer of that. He is going to be the touchdown scorer of that team. Sure. So if he goes to a team like Houston, which could have a gap assuming they don't bring back Lamar Miller or Carlos Hyde. If he goes to a team like Tampa Bay, like you said, who I guess they probably need to bring back Jameis Winston or at least bring in more confident quarterback play, though. But yeah, if he goes to a team that can score touchdowns, I'm sure he'll get a lot of red zone looks and he'll punch a decent amount of them in. Otherwise, I am super excited to fade him like I faded Le'Veon Bell.
I'm kind of in agreement with that. I guess let's, just real quickly, Justin, touch on the other side of that coin. Austin Eckler, what is he if there's no Melvin Gordon?
He's your modern day Danny Woodhead, but more. I mean, we saw it firsthand. I mean, I think that the kid is a bruiser. I think that they like him in that system. Do they want to give him the ball 25 times a game? I don't think that that's ideal, but I think he can withstand some volume. So, it's one of these situations where, too bad for Melvin Gordon, but it's like, we don't necessarily need you at this point. I think as football fans, though, I think it's interesting to see a guy like Melvin Gordon end up on a team like Houston with Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and even Tampa Bay with that offense with Godwin and Mike Evans. It would be, it's his backfield. We know the Bucs need a running back. It'll be interesting for certain. I like Eckler. We like him in PPR formats, but look, when Melvin Gordon wasn't there, he was actually Eckler finished as an RB1, didn't he? Or damn
right,
close.
I mean, the top 10. I mean, look. So here's the thing for me: if Eckler, at the very least, maintains his role, whoever they have as the starter or the between the tackles guy or the early down guy is not going to be Melvin Gordon. Right. So I don't know. I think this is probably good news for Austin Eckler, but one of the issues for him is going to be the same issue as what for Danny Woodhead is holding up to a heavy workload. We'll move on to wide receiver, though, where it's not a huge number of guys. A.J. Green, I think Robbie Anderson at the top of the class. There may be a few other guys.
Sanders, I think, is on.
I think Sanders will be of some interest. I don't think he's going to go. I think he'll go somewhere. I don't know if the 49ers are going to keep him, but that's kind of the top rung there. So, Justin, I want to get into A.J. Green with you because the rumor is, out there are New England. Does it make sense to you?
It does. 32 years old, injury prone. I mean, look, guys, it wasn't that far off or long ago that A.J. Green was in that kind of Julio Jones realm. Let's be honest. When he's on the field, he is a difference maker. It'd be interesting to see him in a different uniform. And he's had the misfortune of playing with Andy Dalton for as many years. I think some of his progress was stunted by the inefficiency of I think at times a horrific Andy Dalton. So it'll be interesting. And like you said, Bob, it's not so much the money for Tom Brady; it's putting the pieces around him. And I think going with an AJ Green, who we don't know what he is because he hasn't played in some time, is a good way to start. I mean, they rolled the dice with Antonio Brown, that backfired. But look, AJ Green is, when healthy, when on the field and healthy, a big emphasis on when healthy, is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I think that would be alluring for Tom Brady to come back. Hey, we just locked up. And I don't know why Bill Belichick as Bill Belichick, the GM, wouldn't talk to Bob Kraft and say, why don't we throw some money at Amari Cooper? And that would be even more enticing. But yeah, he's not nearly as exciting as Cooper. I would do a cartwheel if AJ Green landed in New England even for a year or two, especially with his height, and it would definitely incentivize Brady to probably sign.
Yeah, I think Cooper and Green clearly the top of the class. We had touched on Cooper previously with Dallas, and we'll see what happens with Emmanuel Sanders. Don't consider him the top of the class. I do consider Robbie Anderson a guy that's going to draw a lot of interest. Kyle, your thoughts on him? Sounds like the Jets aren't going to be all in on breaking the bank to keep this guy. Is somebody else going to pay him?
Yeah, I think he'll get a decent amount of I think he'll get probably a short-term contract. He's not that proven of a player, but it seemed so difficult for him to prove himself in both the offense and with Sam Darnold's fine, but I don't think he fits Robbie Anderson's skill set very well. Imagine a world where Robbie Anderson followed Brashad Perriman's career path, and he ends up in that spot Brashad Perriman ended it in the end of the year. We see those exact same games, probably even to a greater extent. That's the kind of guy you want to pair him with. So yeah, whoever, let's say the Chargers, they need to sign Jameis Winston and Robbie Anderson. But I do think it takes, regardless of what type of contract he gets, because I don't think it's going to be a large or much guaranteed one. It's going to take a very specific situation for me to be much interested in. And that requires mostly the right quarterback and the willingness to take shots. I would like to see him get paired up with a guy, just with a cannon, maybe, I don't know, they don't really need it, but a guy like Matt Stafford would throw to him well, or even Lamar Jackson, who they should be looking for weapons for him, and that's something you do well. Guy's got a freaking arm. I don't know how incredibly accurate he is, but I think that just load him up with guys who can go long, and then let him run.
Yep. There will be some players swimming around the sea of mediocrity at tight end, the offseason swim. Austin Hooper is the guy probably atop the list. Eric Ebron's also on there. Greg Olsen already out there swimming around, going to visit the Bills, the Seahawks, the Redskins. Hunter Henry. I'll get the list there, Justin. Hunter Henry. I mean, those are the guys at the top of the list. Jason Witten's going to be available. Tyler Eifert's going to be available. I mean, there's a lot of.
I'm available too if we're just throwing.
Right, Darren Bell's a huge scoring threat. So without digging incredibly deep here, I just wanted to skim the surface of the sea so as not to get any of the scum on me. Austin Hooper would be the top of that list, right? And the Falcons are saying basically that, they'd love to keep him. They think he's going to be great. They're not sure they can. So we'll start with you, Kyle. Austin Hooper, your thoughts. A lot of teams need tight ends because there aren't enough to go around, kind of like the quarterback position. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I actually would prefer Hunter Henry. I just think Hunter Henry is one of the better young, he's been kind of plagued by injuries, but it is, we've seen this with, specifically with his teammate Keenan Allen before, when these guys produce at a young age, as long as their injuries don't seem to be, awfully related. With Keenan Allen, it was a kidney and ACL. It wasn't like Jordan Reed, where concussion. These are clearly patterns, and we know that concussions are a repetitive injury.
Why are you rubbing the Jordan Reed thing in for me, man?
That's trying to draw an example. I know. Maybe he comes back.
Go ahead. Go Tyler Eifert on me, too. I don't care.
Poor guys are plagued. Those guys are plagued.
But, yeah, I think Hunter Henry would actually be my preferred. I just think he's one of the better young, talented tight ends. Not that Austin Hooper isn't, but I just think Hunter Henry's on that next tier. He is in the right situation, he could ascend to that. I don't want to quite say, because it really requires such a specific situation to get to the Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, George Kittle, but he could probably be a tier 2 tight end. And he was in stretches, at multiple points in the past few years. If he can just stay healthy, I really don't. He's a guy who I'm honestly less concerned about the situation, because I think he could excel anywhere with any quarterback. His skill position his skill set isn't nearly as niche as a guy like Robbie Anderson. Just get him with competent quarterback play and let him be healthy. and let him run. Austin Hooper, probably a little less exciting. I just don't think he's as much the athlete as Hunter Henry, but another guy who I think, if he, more specifically, just if he goes to a place with volume, he's a guy who we've seen sort of dominate from like these shallow routes, these slot routes. So get him with a team that is at least going to run a decent amount of passes and get him involved, and he would probably still be a on the right team, he could be a top 6 tight end for me.
Do you feel like, Justin, that Austin Hooper's best value is to stay where he is? We see this with a lot of players. You hate to see someone leave. And in Henry's case, I mean, hell, the quarterback is probably already gone. So maybe it doesn't matter as much for him. So is that kind of where you're at on Hooper with his value with Dirk Cutter, targets the tight end a lot? Yeah. Hooper been working out with Matt Ryan every offseason now, just trying to ingratiate himself, and it seems to be working.
Absolutely. On that Falcons offense with Matt Ryan, I mean, the pieces are there in Atlanta. And I would agree with Kyle. He's going to get paid a shade under the Kelceys of the world. Probably going to, but he's been pretty good. He still finished as a top 5 or 6 tight end in fantasy land this year and missed a couple of games. I think Hunter Henry, the issue there is his health, right? I mean, we hate to say injury prone, but this guy's done. But he's been extremely productive when on the field, and then he's off the field, it seems, more often than not. So definitely for Austin Hooper, you stay put in Atlanta. If you look at the Patriots, and they've done nothing to readdress the Rob Gronkowski situation. Nothing. No. Brought in a 40-year-old Ben Watson. It's like, can you imagine if Austin Hooper was with Tom Brady this year? Things might be different, especially a guy like Hooper. You say, wow, this is a team that could have scored more points. They're a putrid offense. I like Hooper in Atlanta, and I'll have my shares of him.
Why do I feel like Greg Olsen is destined for the Patriots? Something horrible like it. Let me rephrase that question. Ooh. Is there any reason for fantasy owners to be any more interested in Greg Olsen than the Panthers were?
Yeah, because look, let's not. I think Greg Olsen's a tough son of a bee. And if Tom Brady's your quarterback, I think you can compensate for somebody. He's older now, but Rob Gronkowski was very successful. I think and I said this last week. It wasn't that long ago where Greg Olsen was in that scope with the vintage Jimmy Graham, and for quite a while too. He was an 80 catch guy in Carolina. So, permitting he's not ailing and he's not dead. I think if you could get him for a song, absolutely. And I'm at the point now where, and it sounds pathetic, but the Patriots are going to be able to take any offensive weaponry that they can get in comparison to what they had last year.
True. That's very true. So we'll leave it at that for that. We're gonna go to like once a month, and we'll hit on the free agents in more detail, as we gain a little more intel on possible destinations, and the chatter will pick up, of course, because it always does. I mean, look at Greg Olsen is officially the first free agent, and we're already 3 teams into interest in him. So needless to say, there will be plenty of excitement, enthusiasm, and chatter. And when we went through the honors, I missed one thing. I just want to say Michael Thomas getting Offensive Player of the Year. It's hard to say that that's a bad pick, considering the fact this guy broke the reception record, been a consistent high-end producer year in, year out in his first 4 seasons. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. So I don't want people thinking I'm cracking down on Michael Thomas or anything. A phenomenal season by a phenomenal player. The kind of targets I want when I'm drafting wide receiver 1, and I believe he will be the first wide receiver off the board, and with good reason. And that's probably going to happen whether Drew Brees sticks around or not. We'll see how that goes in coming weeks. A little time to make that decision. My guess is it'll come by the end of February, and we'll have a better idea as we head into March what the Saints need to do to shore up their quarterback position. So,
how early would you take Thomas? I know I like to cut you off, but remember a couple of years ago we had Antonio Brown. You could
probably
make a case, and they were 4.
Right. As we stand here right now, Kyle, is that crazy?
Let me see. I would consider
PPR.
I would consider taking him too. Especially, I haven't really dug into it, but I do think we saw I think we're seeing the we've talked about this for years. I think we're seeing the wide receiver 1, the alpha wide receiver 1, the Calvin Johnson, diminishing, and he's kind of, in terms of production, fantasy point production, might be the closest we have to that. So I consider him right now, without putting a ton of thought into it, at 2 behind McCaffrey.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. Whether look, I think if Drew Brees does not stick around, we saw. I mean, look, I think one of Thomas's best games. I think a 40-point fantasy effort game, and I should probably check that before I sound like an ass. But he had a great game with Bridgewater at quarterback.
Yep. Yeah, he did.
And so I'm kind of with you guys. I think he's going to go pretty damn early, and he damn well should. He's a phenomenal player. He is, I think the same three guys are at the top of the list. It's going to be Thomas, it's going to be Hopkins, and it's going to be Devontae Adams. You can kind of pick the order you want him in. Yeah, it was against Tampa Bay in Week 5. He had a 40-plus point game with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. So he's capable, regardless of the quarterback. And we're capable of taking a little time here to get it together, come back in March, and really dig deep on the free agency and kind of set you all up for what's about to happen, because it turns into a bit of a frenzy. You'll be surprised to learn, people. Oh no, you won't. Everyone knows that. So let's wrap it up, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great season. I'm excited to have gotten to do this all year. Fun, great DFS stuff. It was, honestly, I think it's just one of the most entertaining seasons in football we've gotten with Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Michael Thomas. It felt like I'm excited to where the NFL is going, and I'm excited to where this pod is going. We'll have a little bit of time off, but as always, the off season is maybe there is no off season, So excited to get into the off season grinding, and excited to get into the XFL. That's really what life is all about. Everybody, we will catch you next week. For myself at Kyle Tweets here, for Bob at Football Diehard, and Justin
next month,
Lonero.
Kyle.
Next month. Sorry, we don't. Maybe never. Who knows? No, next month. We'll see you next month.